here they are. They have this new medium, this new way of going out, and they had to figure out how they were going to master that. So artists started coming up with all kinds of things. Now, first it would be something like this. They would have, because this is what they had at the academy. In the academy, they would have an easel like this. So they would grab this, and they would have this here, and then they would have a box for their stuff here. Whoops. Almost gave you a discount on a painting. So they would have this box, they'd have bags and stuff, and this is how they would wander into the wilderness. See how unimpractical that is? Okay, so artists started to figuring out, aha, there's a market out there. And you know, artists start this stuff and then companies kind of come by and say, we could do that and we could produce that. So away went that whole studio thing. I'm gonna set this down over here real quick. Away went the studio thing, and artists have been trying to figure out an easier way. So in walks in probably, let's see, these were kind of put into the market fairly early. This is a French easel. Although the best of the French easels, there's usually only two companies that produce a good French easel. That's Julian and Maybeth. I prefer the Maybeths. They're Italian. The Julians are good. Any other French easel that's on the market, don't invest in. You cannot destroy a Maybeth easel. No matter, I mean, they look flimsy. They looked kind of like they wouldn't hold up. I use them in my television show. I've hiked with them for 26 miles into the wilderness. They are amazing. And there isn't a Maybeth easel that was made that isn't around still. I mean, that's how amazingly built that they are. And so you have a drawer, you have a palette, you have a place for brushes. This folds up. So it makes into a nice little suitcase. But for most people, it's still too heavy and cumbersome. But for any artist that is willing to work outdoors on anything large, McVicker uses this exclusively, but most of his paintings are quite large. The great thing about these easels is that you can put a nice big canvas in them. Most plein air painters don't, and one of the flaws that I find with plein air painting is that the galleries are now filled with kind of small, insignificant works. You know? In fact, I'm so disappointed walking into galleries now that all you see is wall, and then you see these gold frames, and in the gold frames they have these itty bitty little things. And you kind of walk up and gone are those big, wonderful paintings that you see in the museums. And primarily because plein air painting, most people feel like they have to get a painting done in 2 hours. McVicker, because he doesn't care about how long he works outdoors or how many times he has to go out on a location, he paints large. So the paintings that you see of his work actually are the size that he paints outdoors. So it's kind of refreshing to see that. It's old school. Now there's another easel that's out there, and I went through my garage and I couldn't find it. It is a collapsible foldable easel that would have been very similar to what Sargent used. It's big like that, but it's made so it's a little bit more lightweight, and it can hold a gigantic canvas. Now, in the period of the 1800s and during the Impressionist period, the paintings, their concept of paintings were still from the salons. So they were producing big work outdoors. They were not thinking about small works. Back then, if you were painting small paintings, and you can go to any museum and look at Monets and Manets and Renoirs and stuff, you're not going to see little tiny 8x10 paintings. You're going to see big canvases, because at that time, if you weren't painting big, you were going to be walked over, because artists were painting even bigger than that. In that period of time, paintings were the entire walls. And you look at the salons back then, and they were filled with gigantic works. Even Manet, some of his paintings, the Impressionist paintings, were the size of this. And you go to the Chicago Museum, you'll see paintings of Impressionism that are that big. So they were painting very, very large because they needed to be seen. At the time, Impressionism was touted as being trite and unimportant and stupid, and these guys were dumb and they were not going to stick. And so these artists had to be noticed, you know, so they're changing the style, but the size was still part of their thing. It was the other artists that started traveling to places that required something a little bit more practical. So, and there's just so many things on the market nowadays. So now what they're producing is they're producing things for artists so that they can go out and paint pretty much on a smaller level. Plein air painting has gotten to the point where it's more about more intimate sketches, more about what you could get done in a couple of hours. It's not about going to back and revisit. In fact, it's kind of like trying to get something like a speed race kind of thing. You got 2 hours to get it done. And the reason why that happens is because the light changes within 2 hours. So either you have an incredible memory, or you take a picture and you finish it off in your studio, or you learn to paint very, very fast. And that's where the speed part of it has come in. One of the early, well, let's just kind of go back into history here. So, some of the artists that we talked about that some students admired is that Bierstadt. Bierstadt and Moran, when they came out west, they were on horses. And they pretty much couldn't carry the big easels and the big things that they were used to in their studios. So what they had adopted was a box like this. And this was pretty much how most American paintings were being done. While the French were going out and working with easels in the countryside, in the parks, and working with large canvases, Bierstadt and Moran were on horses coming out west to Yosemite and camping, and pretty much everything you could put on a horse was for survival. And you weren't allowed to have any more weight that you could possibly have, and you weren't allowed to carry any more space. So everything had to be really compact. Pretty much this was how they would travel. And they didn't work on canvas, they worked on paper. And so if you look at early Bierstadt paintings, you will see in museums that there'll be a consistent size, oftentimes size like 12 by 19 or 12 by 22. And it will say oil on paper mounted on board. And what they would do is they couldn't carry canvases, canvas boards, all that stuff would be very difficult and heavy for them. So they would actually finish paper, rag paper like watercolor paper, and they would put gesso on that, and then they would paint on top of it. Surprisingly, those paintings are mostly still around. And most of your museums where you see anything smaller, like a Bierstadt, anything smaller than a 20 by 24, you can almost bet that it's a study done on his trips, because he did lots of them. And oftentimes what he would do is he would go with Powell or with some of the other, not just him, but Moran too. There was a lot of expeditions that were coming out, because you weren't an artist. It wasn't like you could jump into your VW bug and drive out down the Highway 66 down to the coast. I mean, it was dangerous. And artists as a whole get scared, and they're weak, and they're kind of frightened. They're like, you know, they can be hardy, but they're not like out there to go shoot Indians. They want to paint them. So they would go with people that would shoot Indians and shoot deer and make dinner. And so there are stories about Bierstadt being with 4 or 5 of these trappers or somebody, and he would stop them and he'd go, no, I want to go paint. And they would say, you got an hour. And of course, Bierstadt would work, he got lost at time. Oftentimes when he would disappear, they would make camp because they knew that he was not going to be back in an hour. And when we look at Bierstadt in the big scope of things, he was very, very popular when he came back from Germany. And when he went out west, he did all these sketches, again for studio paintings. And then when he got back to the studio, he produced these gigantic, humongous canvases. And he was very much the Steven Spielberg of the time. Bierstadt was Thomas Kincaid at the time. Bierstadt marketed himself. Remember, Bierstadt was in the news going to Europe to study, to come back as their favorite son. He told them everything. He was a great marketer. And so when he got back from Yosemite, he couldn't do a 9x10 Yosemite scene. He had to do a 6-foot by 12-foot Yosemite scene because he wanted them to feel what it was like to be there. And he would take these little insignificant sketches and he would put them on big canvases, and then he would just schmaltz them up. So a lot of these scenes that you see aren't what they are. And so Yosemite has bigger cliffs, bigger waterfalls. He'd make peaks just because there was no cameras at the time. They almost could do anything with it, so he's a huge storyteller. When the Impressionism started to come into America, he had a hard time getting into the world fairs because now Impressionism started to become favorable and the Hudson River School artists were kind of getting outdated. Bierstadt was such a marketer that he rented a hall across from the fair, put a gigantic painting in there, and sold little cardboard tubes. And he had a painting that was the size of this wall with big Victorian curtains on both ends. And then on the other side of the room, in the middle of the room, he would have a lookout that you would have bars that you could walk up to and lean up against. And you could look at the painting as if you were actually there. And he would control the lighting through curtains on the ceiling. And it was all, I mean, they didn't have movies back then. And people would pay 5 cents to get their little cardboard tubes so that they could see the painting and actually be there in Yosemite. So, you know, he was a huge marketer. When he died, he had got so out of favor that people said that they didn't even know he was alive until they read that he was dead. That's how out of favor he had fallen. And pretty much, I remember in 1980 going to Butterfields and Butterfields in San Francisco, and you could buy a Bierstadt for $1,000. You know, they were nothing. Then Fred Abrams did a book on Bierstadt, and there was a resurgence. But it wasn't the resurgence. Most of these big Hollywood paintings were put into the back rooms of the museums because they were touted as being too cute, kind of like Kincaidish, you know, too much, too, you know, schmaltzy stuff. But the curators started to look at their sketches that he did when he went out to Yosemite, and they said, the guy could paint. He was really good. It was his plainer sketches that revitalized his career. And if it wasn't for his plainer sketches, you wouldn't know who Bierstadt was today, because he'd still be in the back rooms. So Bierstadt would set up a chair, same as this. These are still available through Mabiff. They're probably the most comfortable chair, probably more for women than guys because they have a tendency to tighten everything up, and you kind of straddle this, okay? It's not bad, you just gotta watch that. And then Bierstadt would sit there, and there's photographs of him sitting amongst Indians with his little paint box open, like this. This paint box was made in 1920. And he would sit there, they would lock this. The top of this would hold several panels. Now at the time there probably were paper panels that were applied or somehow adhered to a board. This is where the palette was, this is where the paints were, And some of my favorite paintings that I've ever painted outdoors were done in this box.
Do they make something similar to that?
Yeah, but like all things of the past, things have changed. So now, this is what you think you buy when you go to a store. Grumbacher produces this, and this is their version of it. Okay, no hinge, no panel, kind of a little oversized to have on your lap. No palette to speak of. Some of them have palettes in there, flimsy boards. This one I inherited from a student that belonged to California School of Fine Arts in San Francisco, which is no longer even there. And he studied in 1920, and his wife gave me this when he passed away. These are actually his cardboard dividers that he put in, and these are actually the same bottles that he had that still had oil in them. They're Shiva bottles. And it surprised me that Shiva was around back then, and they fit really in there. This is a great idea because you can literally just walk up, open up, sit on your chair and just paint. And I've had really great success with it, or in a car, or set it down in the cafe. Molly's sitting there going, well, why didn't I take that to France? It's heavy. So that's getting to a whole nother supply thing. So what if you need something a little bit more light? And what if you need to go travel? One of the things that I hear from most students is that they go, well, I don't go and bring my art supplies because it's just too much bother. You don't have too much bother. Oh, they're too heavy. Oh, I don't want to set up. It's too inconspicuous. This is a thumb box. This is very similar to the cigar boxes. You can buy this one from Utrecht. I love it to death. I use this too. In fact, I opened this up, and there's one of my little thumb box paintings. These are done very nicely. You have a place for several panels, a couple panels in. This is a painting I did in Joshua Tree. I'm very bad with cleaning my thing, but you could tell us so. And then you slide that by, that's your palette, and that's where you put your paints. Now we paint with a limited palette, so you only have 3 tubes of paint or 4 in here, and then you cut your brushes down to fit in there. What's awesome about the thumb box is that there's a hole at the bottom to stick your thumb, and now you no longer need to have a tripod. And now I have been known to sit someplace, and you can even do this in church if you're in Europe and you want to paint, an altar. You can sit in church, and very quietly, without anybody knowing, you can actually paint. So it's a very easy, lightweight. So when people say, oh, I don't want to carry all that stuff to Europe, this is all you need.
Who makes that?
This is Utrecht. Now Gorilla Box makes one, a little step up. This one's from Molly. This is a thumb box. You can see that there's a hole in here. This is the one you took to Europe. Did you use it? And what did you say about it?
I really liked it.
That's what you said, you loved it.
The only thing I couldn't quite figure out was you have to do the landscape shape, because if you turn a 6x8 to a front aspect, it falls out.
Yeah. Well, they have little bungee cord things to solve that. I am not in love with Gorilla Box stuff because to me I feel it's overbuilt a little. This hinge on the side, and if you get into any of the Gorilla Box is a brand. If you get into any Gorilla Boxes that are any bigger, they're way too heavy. And they make them, you can put them on a tripod, so they have the tripod thing. But I even find that some of the Gorilla Boxes, when you put them on a tripod, if you don't have a high-end tripod, they start kind of pushing some weight. I don't recommend Gorilla Boxes as much as I would like to. Plus, they make really stupid decisions. If you look at the Utrecht one, you see how the painting sits inside that groove there. Look what they did. Just a cheap little metal thing. And it's not that they don't have an example of how it should be. They just choose to make it easier. These have beautiful little old school latches on them. Look at this thing. I mean, it looks like luggage that I would need to check at the airport if I had to put it in. So for me, it's a little bit too big. One of my friends actually looked at a thumb box that actually was produced in about 1890 by an artist. It's probably the first thumb box that you could find, and he reproduced this almost exactly the way it was. This thumb box eliminated the top, but the top would actually be the canvases, and so you could get 3 canvases on the top. Again, a hole for the thumb box, and then this slides over. The thing with the original thumb box is that they had felt in there so that you didn't get your thumb dirty with the supplies. The reason why you would want to actually do these is because you're painting on the fly. I find, you know, when I look at this and I go, oh, I'm going to be painting, you know, a series of paintings this big. Talk about insignificant work. You know, it's like, you know, here I talk about, oh, our plein air paintings got to the point where, you know, everybody's producing insignificant work. And then you think, how can I paint something that small? It seems so tedious and my eyes don't see very well. It is amazing how the brain works, because when you're sitting there painting, this thing no longer is that small. You actually kind of can get into it where you actually relate to it as being a bigger piece than what it might be. And if I pass this around, you can kind of, I should, so you guys can look at it. If you look at it long enough, this painting starts to become bigger. And when you're working on it after an hour, you're not even aware that it's that small.
That's true.
So you found that when you were in France?
True, yeah.
And then you think, wow, that was a big painting. You know, it's like, so a lot of times these are good enough. And for the most part, when you're going and traveling, if you're not trying to make money at painting or wow the people, you're just trying to enjoy it, this is good enough. I mean, imagine going to France and taking something this small and then producing 12 or 15 small paintings like this and put them on a wall. What a memory you would have, rather than a bunch of photographs you never look at. So this is really a nice way to go. I'll go ahead. You guys can kind of just feel what that feels like. Okay, now let's get into the name brands and the kahunas. One of the first, when plein air painting started to get popular, not popular, but when it started to rise up, there was a need for an artist's box that wasn't as big as a French easel, that was bigger than a cigar box, and something that was more practical with what we would have, like with a tripod. That's something that people would carry. So this company, this man and wife opened up a company called Open Box M. They produced a very nice box that when you open it up, you could put your paintings inside of there. And this section, so the inside of here, you would carry your supplies in, okay? This section came out of that. This is what they call the clamshell. And again, you get to see how I take care of my stuff.
They don't make those anymore?
They do.
They do.
Yeah. Open Box M. Yeah. So anyway, if you look at most artists, and screws not even, if you look at most artists, especially the 10 years ago, this pretty much was the Cadillac. If you were any artist that was worth, that you were serious or worth looking at, or you wanted to know if that was really a serious artist, they would have one of these. And one of the reasons why is that these were considered the Cadillac, and they're really expensive. They are too expensive. I do not recommend this. Their customer service is mediocre. So oftentimes you have to wait for their products. They have this spring system in here that you can adjust, back and forth here. That's tedious to set things up. It squeaks oftentimes. I have 6 of these boxes in every size you could possibly imagine. They make so much racket while you paint what they have in here. For what you pay, they run about $300. For what you pay, way overrated, way overpriced. There's a new company on the horizon that has started producing these, and these are Stratas. This is kind of slowly working into the open box M. These Strata easels, they're made to last. They're not that expensive to work with. They fold up into a smaller space, but they are actually a very, very good product. And I'm seeing them in a lot of professional plein air situations. So the Strata, and they've been putting the Strata in the back, are kind of replacing. What I like about them is that they have this nice little system to hold the canvas as opposed to the clamp that you see in the open box M. You do have to attach it onto a tripod. The tripod, I highly recommend if you're going to go for a tripod, that the tripod be high quality. They produce these tripods. This tripod is really awesome, and you can get them through, they're Surrey tripods. And what's S-I-R-U-I. And I'm going to put all of these addresses for all, for Utrex and all these different boxes. I'll put them on my website, stefanbaumann.com. So under, what do we put those under? Shop. If you only go into shop, it will be additional supplies. And there I just list the different companies and their website. I don't sell any of these things. But what's really awesome about the Strata, they sell these, is that these fold up to be really small. And one of my big complaints with most tripods is that you can't put them in a backpack without sticking out. These tripods are amazing. They're really nice, and they're very, very, very good quality. So if you're going to buy a Strata box, which I would recommend getting their tripod because it works. All tripods work with all of these boxes. If it is customer service you want, customer service you shall have with the Easy L box. Easy L is produced, Peggy, is her name? Peggy. You call up, Peggy answers. Say, Peggy, I need a box tomorrow. She goes, no problem, in the mail. I've had students have a breakdown with their box, and I go, Peggy, I need one tomorrow. No problem. She is amazing. She's also generous. She throws in things if you're a customer of hers. There are things that pop in as gift items. She loves customers, and her customer service is amazing. Far more than any other company. Open Box M, worst customer service. Easy L, best customer service. Produce a pretty good box. Nice thing about that, it's very reasonable. And she's constantly renewing her commitment to producing better and better boxes. That first box that I showed you is what I showed as a cigar box. This also is an Easy L that she made for Kevin McPherson. Again, size matters when you're trying to go light. And so this one was produced by Kevin McPherson because probably Kevin McPherson said, hey, I need a lightweight box that I can put in my backpack and go. So this is produced by her. It is bare bones. You can still put it on a tripod. You have your little canvas thing here. Nice little box like that. Here's your paper palette that you can put in there. You don't have any place for your paints, but a plastic bag will do for paints. You're not carrying around pig bladders anymore. So anyway, so that's a really good product. Watercolors, they have it made. This is a watercolor box. I do watercolors too, periodically. Nobody ever sees them. But I've been known to go to Yellowstone with just this. And do an entire 2 weeks worth of work with just this. And this is my little paint box. Talk about going miniature. That's my little paints. What's amazing is that this costs a lot of money. Good watercolors are not cheap. You think, oh God, you could go to Rite Aid and get one of those kid things. No, this is not the same. This is really pure pigment. Again, I want you to notice the similarity with the palette of my watercolors is with my oils. I'm very consistent with how I keep my supplies. In here, I carry all kinds of fun things, including my tablet, where I was obviously in Zion at the time. And then here's a Yellowstone sketch. But I have several of these books. Yeah, here I was at Yellowstone. I have several of these kind of books, and I'm kind of a stickler for leather and nice stuff, so I don't know where these will end up. But I always kind of find them once in a while and go, oh yeah, I remember I used to do that. So anyway, so you could even go on location with watercolors in a very convenient way.